2 years ago, my mother forced me to break up with my boyfriend and marry my sister's blind fiancé. 2 years later, my blind husband suddenly regained his sight, and my mother demanded that I return him to my sister. My father glared at me with anger, saying, "Ava, don't forget, Michael was originally Vel's fiancé. Who do you think you are to be Mr. Brown? Well, I'm going to die anyway, so whoever wants to be Mrs. Brown can go ahead. After I die, I'll watch them all receive their just desserts." On the day when I accompanied my husband for a follow-up appointment, learning of his impending recovery of eyesight, my mother called me back home, looking at me with an indifferent expression. "Ava, divorce Michael," she said. "Once you two are separated, Vel can marry him." I didn't respond, but was rather surprised at my mother for uttering such words. Seeing that I didn't agree, my father pointed at me fiercely and said, "Ava, don't forget, Michael was originally Vel's fiancé. Who do you think you are to be Mrs. Brown? Don't cling to that position and refuse to budge." I looked at my parents and the fragile Valentina Reynolds hiding in their arms. I found it all rather ridiculous. Yes, Michael Brown had been previously engaged to Valentina Reynolds, but because he lost his sight, my parents couldn't bear to see Valentina marry a blind man, so they broke off the engagement. Little did they know that over these 2 years, the Brown family's business thrived while the Reynolds family faced a downhill slope. 2 years ago, the Reynolds family was in a financial crisis and sought help from the Brown family. Unfortunately, Michael Brown had developed a severe allergy to women due to his blindness. He would break out in hives and discomfort if a woman came within 2 meters of him. The only women exempt from this allergy were my sister and me, as we had grown up together with him, and his condition didn't affect us. When the Brown family demanded the Reynolds family honor the engagement, they readily sacrificed me. I was coerced into signing a prenuptial agreement and marrying Michael Brown. My father's company received a $20 million investment from the Brown family, and I didn't receive a single penny in dowry. I was like a commodity rushed overnight into the Brown mansion. The irony was that my 20 years of belongings didn't even fill a single suitcase. Because of the Reynolds family's previous broken engagement, my father-in-law didn't like me, and my mother-in-law detested me. In their eyes, I was nothing more than a reproductive tool purchased from the Reynolds family to bear Michael Brown's heirs. The ridiculous part was that Michael Brown saw me only as a substitute for Valentina Reynolds. Even when we were most intimate, he would call out Valentina Reynolds' name. In the Brown family, I became Michael Brown's 24-hour caretaker, attending to his every need. His temperament had become unpredictable due to his blindness. He preferred to stay in his bedroom all day, using tobacco to numb himself. While helping him dress in need, he would sometimes press his lit cigarette against my skin, leaving behind either a small hole in my clothes or a circular scar on my body. I couldn't even count how many cigarette scars covered my body, as sometimes new burns overlapped with the old ones, forming new scars. Did I not complain? I did, but I dared not speak out because no one would help me. Did I not want to resist? I did, but if I did, the Brown family could easily destroy the Reynolds family at any moment. The reason I was sent to the Brown family was to please Michael Brown and his family, right? I still remember the first time Michael burned me with his cigarette. I cried and called my mother, telling her how much it hurt. But she scolded me over the phone, saying, "Ava, Michael is just in a bad mood. Endure it, and it will pass. I told you not to offend the Brown family." All right, I endured. I played my role tirelessly. In public, I was Mrs. Brown, adored by all. In private, I was a puppet at the mercy of Michael Brown. I had been married him for a long time without getting pregnant. My mother-in-law would sarcastically call me a hen that couldn't lay eggs every time she saw me. Only I knew that Michael Brown never wanted me to have his child. On the first day he decided to touch me, he arranged for a private doctor to perform a subdermal contraceptive implant behind his parents' backs. I was allergic to the silicone capsule tube material, and the site of the implant in my left arm remained mildly swollen and itchy for a long time. But Michael only cared about satisfying himself and paid no attention to my discomfort. Afraid of his parents finding out, Michael prohibited me from removing the implant, so I had to endure it. 3 months later, the itching subsided, but my left arm had become abnormally swollen. I finally fainted in the mansion. I heard the sound of the ambulance arriving, and the doctor explained that due to severe allergies, my body had been fighting the implant, causing the medication to leak from the storage area. My body had absorbed too much medication, and I might never be able to conceive again. I laughed, grateful that I could finally escape the indescribable torment of the itching. But I cried, realizing that I could never be a mother again. After this incident, my mother-in-law grew even more disdainful of me, and I had to be even more cautious in the Brown family. However, Michael seemed to feel a bit guilty and treated me slightly better. He no longer pinched my waist or burned my hand. With nothing to worry about, Michael Brown became increasingly obsessed with my body. In the darkness, he would imagine me as Valentina Reynolds and force me into various humiliating acts, while I could only cry silently beneath him. I often wondered when this life would end. It wasn't until that day when Michael Brown slipped and fell in the shower. Not only was he a foot taller than me, but he also outweighed me by a significant margin, and I couldn't grab hold of him in time. Michael Brown hit his head, and I sprained my ankle. That day, my mother-in-law slapped me twice, and I was locked in a small guest room. Meanwhile, Michael Brown was taken to the hospital. After an examination, it turned out he had no serious injuries, and his optic nerves, which had been suppressed for a long time, were showing signs of recovery. Even the doctor said this accident might have been a blessing in disguise, and that he might regain his sight soon. The day Michael was discharged, he did indeed begin to perceive a faint glimmer of light. I was released from the small guest room and received his mother's treatment for the first time. A private doctor came to check my sprained ankle, and maids helped with cooking and laundry. From that day on, my mother-in-law no longer made me do the dirty and tiring work, and I even received some pocket money. I learned a set of massage techniques from the doctor and massaged Michael Brown's acupoints continuously. Finally, I began to lead a somewhat normal life. On Michael's first follow-up appointment, he could sense changes in light and dark. Meanwhile, I had a persistent cough for over a month and decided to get a checkup. 1 month later, during his third follow-up appointment, the blood clots pressing on his optic nerves had disappeared, and he could now see shadows clearly. The doctor predicted that he would fully regain his sight soon. Meanwhile, I was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. The cancer cells had already spread to half of my lungs. I couldn't believe it. I was only 28 years old. I hadn't had a chance to enjoy my life. Refusing to give in to fate, I obtained permission to leave the house while Michael Brown was in high spirits. I went to another hospital for a second opinion, but the results were the same. Another month passed, and during Michael Brown's fourth follow-up, he could see vague double images. As for me, I received a late-stage lung cancer diagnosis. The cancer had spread to half of my lungs. I had only a few months to live unless I had half of my lung removed. But how long would I live with only half a lung? As I hesitated to tell my parents about my diagnosis while clutching the confirmation document, they called and asked me to come home, a rare occurrence after 4 years. I was overjoyed, thinking they had finally remembered me. To my surprise, the first thing they said when they saw me was that I should divorce my husband and give him to my younger sister. Looking at the three of them, I felt like a stranger. My parents had once showered me with affection as a child, but at some point, they had changed. I realized that ever since Valentina Reynolds was born, my parents had changed. From that day on, they could only see Valentina, and I had become invisible. I felt like a complete stranger living in that house. I had to give way to my sister in everything, and what she had, I had to give up. When she fell as a child, I got punished. When she made a mistake, I was punished. She treated things she didn't like as trash and threw them at me. The things I liked were always taken from me and destroyed. She effortlessly gained my parents' favor, while I had to work hard to receive a half-hearted compliment. When I scored highly on the college entrance exam, my parents considered it ordinary. But when my sister got into a third-rate high school, she received various rewards and praise. My sister was so cute and angelic when we were children. I was always afraid she would get hurt, and I can't even count how many times I acted as a cushion for her when she was learning to walk. After all, she was my younger sister. But I never thought that my angelic sister from our childhood would turn into a demon when she grew up. All her happiness was built on my suffering. She knew I longed for our parents' love, so she effortlessly stole their attention. She only knew I yearned for freedom, but pushed me into the abyss of the Brown family. I looked at my family, who I had lived with for more than 20 years, and for the first time, I felt somewhat hysterical. Why? Why are you doing this to me? Why should I marry when I don't want to? Why should I divorce Michael Brown when you insisted I marry him in the first place? Why did you say I'm not worthy now if you made me marry him? My father slapped me hard, sending me to the ground. Ava Reynolds, don't forget who raised you, who paid for your education. I didn't raise you to defy me. A smug smile appeared on Valentina Reynolds' face. My mother hesitated for a moment and then said, Ava, anyway, Michael doesn't like you, so why not let them have their way? At that moment, I was thoroughly disappointed in my family. I stood up, dazed, and forced a bitter smile. As long as he agrees to a divorce, I have no objections. Anyone who wants to be his wife can go ahead. I turned and left that heartbreakingly painful place. When I returned to the Brown family, I didn't expect Michael Brown to be waiting for me. He could now move around on his own without assistance. He stumbled toward me and handed me an envelope. I opened it, and inside were 2 signed divorce agreements, a check, and a set of keys. Ava, sign it. That house on West Street, these $2 million, and these keys are yours as compensation for the divorce, he said.